I can hear the rumble of boldest distant thunder as 100 tons of steel roars down the track. Train comes round the horseshoe turn, headlights beam, then it storms into the station with a rush of steam. All aboard as we climb inside, and we know that we're in for an exciting ride. Like the real life version of a Lionel train, it's the great railway adventures. There's not a thing to lose and the world to gain on the great railway adventures.
The Mighty Mogul. Gazing out the classroom window, Jim Prescott was surprised to see a storm coming in over the prairie. Just that morning, the March sky had been blue as a jay. At recess, he and his friends had played hide-and-seek in the new grass, glad that spring had finally arrived. Now, as Jim watched the dark clouds spread like a blanket over the Kansas plains, he could feel the cold of winter returning. At the front of the room, Katie Riley was busy reading a story to her students. Suddenly, a cold wind blew the door open and whipped the book right out of her hands. A worried look crossed her face. This was no ordinary storm. Jim thought Miss Riley was the kindest teacher in all the world. On cold days, she made cocoa for the children on the school's pot-bellied stove. On hot days, she brought them pitchers of icy lemonade. She read them stories about fierce giants and fire-breathing dragons. Miss Riley's eyes always seemed to be smiling, but they were not smiling now. "Children," she said, her voice full of concern, "I'm closing school. I want you all to hurry home." "But what about the story?" asked Charlie Lawson. "You were just getting to the good part." "It'll have to wait," Miss Riley answered. "This storm looks dangerous." Snow was already falling as the children rushed out the door of the little red schoolhouse. Jim took Charlie's hand. By the time they crossed the fields, the snow was coming down so thick that the boys could hardly see. They were cold and wet and 2 miles from home. In the distance, Jim heard the clanging of a brass bell, followed by the steady chug-chug-chugging of a train. A big smile spread across his face. "That's Skeet!" hollered Jim. "What's a skeet?" asked Charlie. "It's not a what, it's a who," answered Jim. "Skeet's my uncle, and he's the engineer of the Mogul. Come on, we're in luck." Jim and Charlie raced toward the railroad tracks. As the Mogul approached, Jim felt his heart beat fast, the way it always did when he heard the mighty freight engine thundering like an iron horse across the plains. Skeet leaned out of the train as it rolled to a stop. "Hey there, Jimbo," he called, flashing his handsome grin. "You two look like you could use a lift." He held out his hand. "Hop into my living room." Jim and Charlie climbed aboard the locomotive. The heat from the smoldering coal warmed the engine's cabin. Jim held his freezing hands over the firebox and sighed with relief. He always felt safe when Uncle Skeet was around. The Mogul made its way along the track, stopping at the covered bridge that separated Jim's family farm from Charlie's. "What's the opposite of all aboard?" Charlie asked as Uncle Skeet lifted him down from the train. "Oh, skedaddle," Skeet laughed. "And that means you. I've got to step on it if I'm going to make it to St. Louis by noon tomorrow." "Will you be safe out here?" Jim asked. "It's snowing awful bad." "Don't you worry, Jimbo," said Uncle Skeet. "This is the Mighty Mogul. She can handle any trick Mother Nature has tucked up her sleeve." Then, with a wink of his eye and a clang of the Mogul's brass bell, Uncle Skeet was off. All that night, the blizzard raged. Snow fell thick as cotton. Wind whipped through the sycamore trees, sending branches flying. At Jim's farm, the upstairs window shattered and the roof of the old barn caved in. Ma stayed close to the fire, rocking the baby. Pa and Jim barely made it out to feed the animals. For 2 days and 2 nights, the snowstorm pounded the countryside. When at last it ended, it had touched every farm and every family. No one escaped its fury. Miss Riley stood in front of the little schoolhouse. Although she tried not to cry, she couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Her beloved school lay before her, ruined. The roof had caved in, and the red walls were flattened as if a giant had crushed them under his feet. The books were soaked, the map was torn, and the slates were broken to bits. Even the old pot-bellied stove had been smashed by a falling beam. The children tried to comfort Miss Riley. "We'll build a new school," said Jim softly. Miss Riley shook her head. The storm had hit all the farms for miles around. People would have to use every spare penny to rebuild. No, there would be no money for a new school. In the months that followed, Miss Riley tried to make the best of it. When the sun warmed the ground, she held class in the yard. She taught letters and numbers by drawing them in the dirt with a stick. She had no books, but she told the children stories from her imagination. They had spelling bees and played duck, duck, goose. Jim knew, though, that without a real building, they would not be able to start school in the fall. All through the summer, Jim worked in the fields, helping Pa tend the crops. Every week, they went to town to see Uncle Skeet when he came through on his run. One day, they saw Miss Riley talking to Charlie Lawson. Charlie had tears in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Jim asked, although deep in his heart, he knew. "I'm leaving next Saturday on the stagecoach," Miss Riley said. "I have to look for another job." "I told her not to go," said Charlie, stifling a sob. "We want her to stay with us, don't we, Jim?" Miss Riley was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "We have lost our school," she said sadly. "There is no place for me to teach here, so I must leave. I want you children to remember what I've taught you and know that I love you very much. Never forget that." Skeet saw how much Miss Riley loved the children and how deeply they would miss her. He saw the sad look in Jim's eyes. He knew something had to be done.